every day it's just a competition back and forth from both parties and their surrogates to see who can be more offensive in their support for genocide. Like one day it's Rudy Giuliani saying some bigoted stuff at Madison Square Garden. Next day it's Bill Clinton saying something repellent in Michigan. And in fact, that's the theme of today's 4 basic food groups. We're going to hear from both of these gentlemen. So let's kick it off with Democrats Suck.
Okay, so for Democrats Suck, let's take a look at what Bill Clinton had to say at a rally ostensibly for Kamala Harris in Michigan. I don't understand how he thought that this would be helpful to her, but you guys can be the judge.
I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But if you lived in one of those kibbutzim.
No, he didn't say cabooses. He was trying to say kibbutzim, by the way, in case you missed that. Okay.
Kibbutzes.
In Israel, right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza. And Hamas butchered them. And so then the people who criticize it are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in Ritalin. So how many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize, what would you do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians, and one day they come for you?
Okay, so this is just insane. He's saying that because some Palestinian militants broke out of their concentration camp because Gaza is occupied by Israel, which he's omitting, that gives Israel the right to slaughter tens of thousands of Palestinians, because some of the Israeli victims on October 7th lived in areas that were pro-peace.
Right.
I mean, it's just completely deranged. There's no like revenge exception in international law. Like, you don't get to slaughter a bunch of civilians because some of your own civilians were killed by an occupied population and some of your own people happen to support peace. And by the way, he's omitting that there were Israeli soldiers who were killed on October 7th. And also he's omitting the fact we don't know how many people Israel killed on October 7th because that's been covered up. But we do know they killed at least some of their own people by employing the Hannibal directive. But anyway, all that's details. The principle here is what is he talking about?
Yeah, and it also just shows like the imagine if it were your family. I mean, he has no empathy for Palestinian families. Why doesn't he imagine it was his family who's been wiped out? Like, he just has humanity he sees the humanity of Israelis, but not Palestinians.
Yeah, and if you're going to make that argument, you have the right to use violence against civilians because something that happens to your family, then honestly, the only people who can make that argument are Palestinians. Yeah. Because they've been occupied and ethnically cleansed for decades. I'm actually not making that argument. I don't think anybody has the right to commit violence against civilians, no matter what happens to their own civilians. I don't believe, that's terrorism. I don't believe in it. But if anybody has an argument to make, it's Palestinians, because they're the ones who are militarily occupied. And what gets obscured in all this is that, I don't think Hamas set out to kill civilians on October 7th. Some of their people did, and some Palestinian militants did. But the operation was clearly an attempt to attack the Israeli military and to take captive Israeli soldiers so they could exchange them for Palestinians that are being held hostage inside Israeli prisons. Right. So, but anyway, all that's obscure in the details. But so what is Bill Clinton saying here? He thinks he's going to go to Michigan, where you have tens of thousands of people who are upset about genocide. And he's saying, get over it because some pro-peace Israelis were killed on October 7th. It's so offensive. And then, in fact, it gets even more offensive.
It gets even worse,
Slaughter the people in your village. You would say, well, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't how many we've had to kill, because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded by civilians. Mm-hmm. They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself.
Poor Israel. I mean, it is a victim of Hamas's human shielding. But for this human shielding, which, by the way, according to Amnesty International, they documented lots of examples of Israel using human shields, and they did not document cases of Hamas using human shields. But I love the argument that, let's say for argument's sake, that they did do that, okay? Just for argument's sake. I love the idea that, but for that, Israel would be really careful with civilians.
Yeah, and what's also obscured here is that the people of Gaza have nowhere to go. They're trapped in a death camp, right? So it's like, by definition, they're going to be near Hamas because nobody can leave. They're they're in a very small strip of land, more than 2 million people, and it's actually even more confined because Israel's ordered people to flee their homes, so they're even more concentrated than they were before October 7th. So. It's Israel that forces humans to be victims because they won't let them leave. It's worse than using people as a human shield. It's keeping people inside a death camp on purpose.
And then pretending that they're being used as human shields.
Yeah, it's just so unbelievably cynical. But look, it gets even worse. And we have to hear more of this because this is who the Democrats are. Bill Clinton goes on to make essentially a messianic biblical argument that there were some Jews in Palestine 2,000 years ago. So therefore, sorry, Palestinians, you have to get mass murdered.
Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before their faith existed, they were there. In the time of King David, and the southernmost tribes had Judea and Samaria.
So now he's just making a straight up Jewish Christian fundamentalist argument that because according to the Bible, there were some Jewish tribes in Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, that therefore now 2,000 years later, European Jews have the right to come over and steal all Palestinian land, commit ethnic cleansing, and now commit mass murder to maintain their stronghold over the land they stole. I mean, yes, there were Jews in Palestine 2,000 years ago. There also were Christians and Muslims. Does that give anyone the right to then say that they have the divine right to all the land and commit mass murder and ethnic cleansing? Bill Clinton is saying yes. That's what he's saying. This is like straight up religious fundamentalism. And he's a top surrogate right now for Kamala Harris in a state that they need to win, and where there's a lot of Muslim and Arab American voters. Like, are they trying to lose? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Are you trying to lose?
I think maybe the Clintons are really upset that Hillary Clinton didn't get to be the first female president, and they don't want Kamala to get to be it either.
It's quite plausible. Honestly, how else do you explain this behavior?
Yeah, I mean, besides the fact that it's a disgusting worldview, isn't Bill Clinton smart enough to read the room? It's a disgusting argument, but doesn't he know that it won't be convincing to people who care about Palestinians?
I mean, yeah, listen, there are many theories that could explain this behavior. I think yours is quite plausible, that the Clintons are just trying to go scorched earth and not allow Kamala to be the first female president. Another theory is that the Israelis have so much compromise on Bill Clinton, and the guy does have a long track record of, compromise worthy behavior, that maybe this is why he's doing it. I don't know, but it's or they're just so fanatically devoted to Israel and Israeli occupation that they're just willing to go into, a swing state with a lot of Arab Americans, a lot of people who oppose genocide and offend them. Who knows? But whatever it is, it's not helping their chances. There's another personal aspect for this when it comes to Bill Clinton, which is that he's been on a 24-year PR campaign of lying about Palestinians and blaming them for the collapse of the so-called peace process. He claimed falsely that Arafat rejected a really generous peace deal that he helped put together, which is not true. Israeli officials have even said, Shlomo Ben-Ami, the former foreign minister of Israel, said that if I were Palestinian, I would have rejected the offer that Israel put forward with Clinton's backing at Camp David. He literally said that because he knew that the offer, the so-called generous offer that Clinton oversaw from Israel, the Palestinians, denied Palestinians their most basic rights. It kept the major West Bank settlement blocks. It wouldn't meaningfully address the refugee issue. It wanted to take more Palestinian land in the West Bank than it was willing to offer Israeli land in return as compensation. Completely unfair. And Bill Clinton's been lying for 24 years, saying that Palestinians walked away from this really generous deal.
Right.
So he's been involved in a propaganda campaign to justify Israeli violence against Palestinians. And that's what he's continuing here. And by making these ridiculous biblical claims that nobody except for a religious fanatic takes seriously. So that's Bill Clinton as well. There's a personal thing here, and it's so vile what he's doing. And I think he's playing with fire. They need Michigan to win. And every time he opens up his mouth here, he's just turning off more people who oppose genocide.
You can't make this up, honestly.